Top 10 opportunities for Christian stewardship services.
And here we are at the last one. And this is the one that we've talked about throughout all of the other presentations, and that is how Christian stewardship services can help you to help your donors. As Marinus was talking about, that the bag of clubs or the bag of tools or however you want to put it, those are the things that we have. Those are the things that we can help to explain within a discussion with your clients. We can pull out 2 or 3 or even 4 different tools and help them to structure and formalize what it is that they have in their mind to do. And so how do we go about doing that? Janet started talking about her work and her work in helping you to connect with the donor. And she can help you to put a case for support together to help you to make that discussion with the client. She can help you to design a brochure. She can help you in many, many ways, including your training, including making sure that you understand the tools that are available. Second, look at this table of people in front of you. They have a lot of expertise in the area of their tools. You know, Wayne's modest about his story about that $6 million gift. That was an incredible amount of work that he did on the face of a small little napkin. And so it's just unbelievable how over one cup of coffee, that Wayne moved this conversation from something that this donor had in his mind to something that would actually work and get the donor excited about it. Now, it was a lot of work. It didn't all happen over that cup of coffee, but certainly that's where it started, and Wayne was able to get that donor excited about that. So we can discuss those options, we can bring in the tools that are necessary, and we can help you to, or we can help your donor to live out those stewardship goals that they may have. Next, we make it easy. We make it ever so easy. We have processes in place, and we've been working on those processes over the last number of years to make sure that the hand-holding that takes place with the client, that relationship that Henry talked about, happens from beginning to end. Lorinda has been excellent at making sure that she keeps in touch with our clients where they are. So just keep calling them and making sure that the next step happens and the next step happens. She's in touch with the lawyer to make sure they have what they need to prepare the will or anything else. And so those processes are in place to make sure all of those things happen. And then lastly, as Henry and a few other ones talked about, we use a lot of these assets. We now have about $37 million under management. A lot of these assets are being used in kingdom work. We have charities that borrow from us, and as Henry likes to say, we're the only shop in town. They can't go elsewhere to get this kind of mortgage. Banks just don't understand charities and so on, and it's very difficult for them to do that. We understand and we know what we're looking for. We have very good process in place to make sure that the mortgages that we do lend out are secure and safe, but we are willing to work with these organizations. And then lastly, you have it in front of you. The booklet that you're paging through, that's a great opportunity for you to read that through, to take it along. You will have noticed that we are videotaping this presentation as well. The idea is that we will make this available in its component parts to you. So if you'd like to view this again, or if you have other staff members that might want to review this, by all means, we'll make that available to you as well. I can't reiterate how important it is to get us in touch with your clients. We make those gifts happen in many, many of these cases. We can help those donors to live out their stewardship plans, and they often will tell us stuff that never gets talked about in any other conversation about what their stewardship goals really are. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to allow us to walk beside you with your donors and to make those gifts happen. So I thank you very much for your attention during this presentation. As promised, we will take any questions that you may have about any of these tools, and so we will do that at this time.
Just to be stewardly about people's time and travel, for the people in Ontario, could you share where this person might be home based so that, well, I'm not telling them to go to you when they have to go from, let's say, St. Catharines to Toronto to meet you, when there's another person that already lives in their backyard. So.
Yeah, the question is, where is our home base? Our home bases are, we have, go ahead.
Where do the people live? So that if I'm recommending somebody from St. Catharines, I'm not telling them to meet with somebody, with a field agent who's in Ottawa.
Yeah, yeah. Marinus lives in Vineland, which is very close to St. Catharines. He's our Ontario representative. But the point I was trying to make is we meet with the donor in their own homes. We are all over the place as far as, you know, I still live in Cambridge, Ontario, and you regularly drive out to all the various areas. So once we have a referral from you to go and visit with a donor, we usually have other donors sort of in that geographical area, and so we will do 2 or 3 or 4 visits in those areas as we go around. Just to give you an understanding, Marinus, as I said, lives in Vineland in St. Catharines. Wayne just moved to Calgary, so he's located in Calgary. Dave is situated on the island, just off BC, but he's often on the mainland, on the lower mainland, and so on as well. Wayne, just to give you an understanding, his territory basically extends pretty well through the western provinces. The game plan for him is to be in many of those locations, like Winnipeg and going up to Edmonton and northern BC and all of those areas, and so he can meet with your donors wherever they are. Yes.
Question on minimums for gift annuities for RDAs and also for gifting accounts. Do you have a paper somewhere or something that has all those minimum amounts on?
Our minimum is $5,000 for all of those.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Thanks to the team for your presentations. It's very informative and useful. Wayne, I have a question for you about gifting RRSPs, and good to see you again. First of all, how long typically does the CRA take to make a decision on a T1213?
Generally, in our experience, well, the CRA with any T1213, whether they're using it for a paycheck request or an RSP withdrawal request like this, they commit to getting back to the donor within about 6 to 8 weeks. So that's how long you need to allot for that. Generally, the fastest response is just to fax it off to the CRA with the request and the case for why you want to make the withdrawal. You should hear back from them within 6 to 8 weeks. I had one client who, after 2.5 months, had said, oh, I haven't heard back from them yet. And I said, well, let's call them. Well, then they found out they filed it and they actually received it after 4 weeks. They just misfiled it. But at that point, you go down to the bank and it might take a few days for the bank to realize what you're asking them to do, because they don't deal with that too often. But yeah, I would say the whole process should be doable in about 8 weeks' time.
What's the demographic or the age target for this discussion? You know, are they approaching the time that they're going to flip from an RRSP to a RIP, or?
Honestly, I've done this with people ranging from mid-40s to late 70s. It just comes down to where they feel they're at in their finances. Like, a business owner who's just transitioning into retirement might still have some royalties being paid to him or her from their business or their sale or something like that. Another person might be well into retirement and just looking at their pension income they're getting from other sources. I generally wouldn't expect you to be able to make a convincing pitch to someone under the age of 50 for the most part, because they're very unsure of what the future is going to look like. But once that hazy image starts to become a little more clear, at that point people are more open to these discussions.
One last question. Is the treatment the same for RRSPs and RIFs?
Yes. The only difference as far as RSPs and RIFs go is that when a person is making a withdrawal from their RIF, the withholding tax wouldn't apply anyways to the mandatory minimum withdrawal. Other than that, in the brochure, for example, it talks about an RSP or RIF is just a type of account. They're basically the same, only difference is one is in your savings and accumulation phase of retirement planning, and one is in the income and withdrawal phase. Other than that, they're the same essentially.
Thanks, Wayne.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jerry?
Yeah, on the same subject, Wayne, you gave the example of a $100,000 RRSP withdrawal, and eventually it was a break even, right? The receipt and the taxes that had to be paid evened out. Now, typically with an RRSP, the amount might be much more than the annual income of that individual and would far exceed the 75%. Okay? In that case, they would not be able to use that in 1 year. Would it still be tax neutral, or how would they proceed with that?
Okay, I'll just rephrase the question for a second for those who may not have heard it. Jerry's question was about whether if a person makes a huge withdrawal from their RSP, if they're able to make use of the donation credits, because during your lifetime, you're only able to claim 75% of your net annual income as a donation. That's part of the planning process, to be honest with you, to make sure that a person is able to take advantage of that. And that's one of the cases that we make to the Canada Revenue Agency, is that they will be able to make use of their donation credits, because they want to know that, because or else they won't forgive all of the withholding tax. So in a case like that, where a person may not be able to claim all of the donation credits, we may structure it over a multi-year period. So we may do it over 2 or 3 years and just file a request every year with the Canada Revenue Agency to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, go ahead.
I have a question on life insurance. Whole life, if somebody donates a whole life policy to a redeemer in this case, and we're the owner and beneficiary of the policy, and the premiums are paid up, excuse me, when he does it at, let's say, age 70, 75, but if the donor is still alive, and well, let's say 20 years later, the cash value of that policy is used up. Whose turn is it to pay the rest of the premiums? Is that the institution, or go back to the donor? What is the preferred method of handling that?
Well, that's an interesting question. For those that may not have heard the question, a paid-up insurance policy gets donated to your charity, and after a while, after a period of time, the cash surrender value gets used up by paying the premiums within the policy, but the donor has not passed away, and so premiums have to start being paid again. And then the question was, should the client pay those premiums, or should the charity pay those premiums? And that really depends. You can go back to the client, to the donor, and say, if you pay these premiums, you will get a donation receipt for the amount of the premium that you paid. If the donor is unwilling to do that, or you can't get a hold of the donor, or whatever the reason might be, then the charity has to decide, is it worth our while to pay these premiums? It may be, a couple of $100,000 policy, and the premiums may be fairly small to pay that. So then the charity has to decide whether or not it's worth the charity's while to pay those premiums. So I'm not sure if that completely answered your question, but I'm not sure if there's a rule of thumb to pay that. But I would probably go back to the donor.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
A question also for Wayne with respect to life insurance gift. When the accountant and the lawyer said this can't be done, and he says, well, it can be done, but you don't know how to do it. After you explained it to them, did they see the wisdom, or did they say, oh, we did not know that, or were they appreciative of how that worked, or how did they receive being corrected in effect?
Yeah, so the question for people at the back was how the accountants and the professional advisors reacted to finding out that this T1213 gift could be used for the life insurance policy. Actually, it was kind of funny. The accountant afterwards said, "Yeah, I knew I could do that." Like they were not nasty. They were not anything like that. In fact, with the accountant themselves, I had very little personal interaction. That the donor in this case simply wanted to run through a scenario with the accountant, and they were unsure about it. But after being sort of taken through the process and seeing how it was done and realizing what the actual intent was, they were very agreeable and amenable to going along with it.
Yes, go ahead.
Slightly different question. The 24 million that you have in mortgages and loans, are those all loans that your organization adjudicates and underwrites correctly? Are you making those loans?
Yes.
And who assesses the risk and structure of those loans?
We have an investment committee that's made up of a banker, a lawyer, various levels of expertise, representatives of our partner organizations as well.
And how many loans would that represent?
I'm supposed to ask that till this afternoon. I would, just a quick answer, about 50. Yeah.
And then have you had any defaults?
No.
Do you have any that are at risk?
We have one right now that hasn't paid their property taxes, so we're chasing them a bit, but we expect that to get resolved.
I'm not sure who was first. I'll let Henry and then.
Rollins had his hand up.
Sorry. Yeah, okay. You can go first then. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Just wondering if CSS has suggested approaches, possibly suggested letters to get the word out about the new first-time donor super tax credit that's available from 2013 to 2017. Is there, because that's also available, as you know, to lapsed donors who have possibly haven't taken advantage for the last 5 years. I'm kind of thinking about, you know, is there a suggested approach to get that word out and to get our donations in?
The question was, have we done any thinking about how to properly promote the super tax credit as it's being dubbed? We've talked about it. Generally speaking, I would very much venture to guess there's not a single person in this entire room that would qualify, and I doubt very much that any of your donors would qualify as well. You have to have not made a donation in the last 5 years. So if you're talking to one of your donors and they haven't made a donation in the last 5 years, they probably won't. Trying to be a little bit, it's really not something that we've talked much about. It is something that the government is, and they do this all the time. They try to enhance a little bit of a something to help people to give and so on. This is very much targeted towards people that have not given before, or as you said, have lapsed in their giving. So it's certainly something that you should be aware of, how it works and so on. But generally speaking, I would venture to say that very few of you would have any call, or your donors would have any call to use that either. Henry?
Just 2 comments, if I may, back to RDA. I omitted to share them earlier, not intentionally, and Jill will attest to this. What my experience was been that an RDA is a very practical tool, which can spill over to other things. There have been charitable gift annuities that have come of this and other conversations, and it keeps on going on a regular basis. And the second thing, we've even found a better name for an RDA. And it was one of my board members who participated who said, why don't we just call it a rainy day account? And we actually used it a few times in some of our newsletters. And that actually, I think, got the attention of more than a whole write-up. Rainy day account, it's something that can really get their head around.
It's just to echo that a little bit. The revocable deposit agreement, the RDA, has just been, it's been unbelievable how much money comes into the RDA. Jill and I speak most mornings at about 9 o'clock. We just kind of touch base to see what we're doing in that day, and then she'll say, well, yesterday we got a check for $200,000 or $100,000, or 3 checks showed up for a total of X amount. It's just unbelievable how much money comes in. And people often will, you know, put $20,000 or something like that in as a sort of an initial deposit. Let's just see how this works. And then 6 months later, when they start receiving the income and their charity calls them to thank them for the amount that went to the charity, they go, hey, we got another GIC coming due. Let's just send that off to Christian Stewardship as well. And so it just builds and builds and builds. And it's just been such a wonderful tool. Yes?
Being Canadian-based in our organization, Canadian and U.S., do you take U.S. Money into the RDA, or are you not allowed to do that?
Because it is a deposit, we could probably take the deposit, but the money, the charitable portion, would have to go to a Canadian charity.
That's fine, you can go to our organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Yes, Terry.
Just a question regarding the gifting accounts or donor advised funds. What is the administration fee or charge that CSS assesses on that? I guess the question is more aimed at if we're opening this up, and like you said, in one case, you know, PayPal, you could get thousands of $5, $10 contributions to these if they're kind of public type things. Is that the intention of them, and is it just in terms of only operating on behalf of donors or on behalf of partners as well?
We have, so the question was, what is the administration fee, and do we offer them to partners as well as to donors? Our administration fee is 1%, and you know, I come from sort of the financial sector, and if you can get a similar account for less than 2%, you know, many of my colleagues here also have come from sort of that area, and they will attest that many times it's in excess of 2%. So our 1% administration fee in general terms is extremely low. Secondly, is it open to charities? Absolutely. Our RDA gets used by many, many, many charities. We just recently were talking, again, Wayne chatted with a school that had sold some property. They had $400,000 sitting in a GIC earning, you know, next to zero. And Wayne started talking to them about different things. And that came up as well. And Wayne goes, well, how would you like to earn 5% on that instead? Well, how would we do that? Well, put it into the RDA. 100% of the income can go back to the charity because it is already owned by a charity.
I guess it was more focused on the gifting account. For instance, if my organization is going to have a campaign, it seems
Terry,
administratively,
if I might add, yes.
You get CSS to do all that.
This is something that we've started to do fairly recently, and we do have to be careful not to receive lots of $5 gifts, like you said. The one that I talked about, the gifts have all been, the smallest was $100. But when we did the Tim's Tribute gift, what we did, we said that we would only issue receipts over $50. But we're not expecting to do lots of these small gifts until we get some new computer program to handle it for us. But we do want to make that available to people when opportunities come up, like the Kinder's Foundation, because there's lots of different amounts of gifts coming in, but they're mostly averaging around $500 or whatever. But we did one for one of our other partners as well, asked us to do a similar thing. It was much more small scale, but we were able to offer them that facility as well. It's just something that we've started doing, but we are aware that it can be costly time and administratively in doing this, so we are keeping an eye on that, yeah.
That answer your question? Yes. Al?
Yeah, tax-free saving account. Has CSS considered getting into that as a way to offer those services?
As a deposit-taking
Yeah.
institution. One of the things, and you'll learn about that this afternoon, is we have a new strategic plan, and it's a 3-year strategic plan, and that is actually one of the areas that we're looking at. We're looking at all kinds of different avenues where we might be able to grow, what we might be able to offer, and those kinds of things. That's not something that we have immediately on the horizon, but it's certainly something that we're going to be looking at.
CSS can help. Call 1-800-267-8890 or visit us online at csservices.ca. Thank you.